about the cost management. We'll talk more about that a little bit later, and backup and recovery, which is always good for peace of mind. It's also enterprise ready. Okay, your data can be global. We have 60 plus regions that you can go to. Hybrid support, definitely we know that most of the solutions that our customers are using are hybrid in a way, where maybe you have some data on premise, some in the cloud, maybe the application in the cloud and the SQL Server on premise. Azure Active Directory, all right, this is very important to secure your application and to have something like role-based access control for your app. This is super easy to do with Azure Active Directory and also extremely powerful for everything you have on Azure. And finally, of course, security and compliance. So let's talk about deployment options, because you really have a number of ways to bring your application into the cloud. And so here we have started by doing a migration, meaning that the app service migration assistant went to take the code, moved it as is into Azure and ran it. But of course, later you want to have some kind of continuous deployment option where you can continue to work on your application, modify it where necessary, and then have a continuous deployment. And this is exactly what right-click publish is not, all right? So don't get confused. Right-click publish is a feature that you have in Visual Studio. My DevOps friends are very much against it. It's not managed, all right? But it is sometimes convenient, and let's face it, as a developer, I think everybody did a right-click deploy, a right-click publish at some point. So you can literally deploy from Visual Studio to Azure. Major issues with that is that it's not actually going to scale, all right? If you want to deploy multiple times during the day, it's going to be a little bit troublesome. Also, it's not automated, so it's more difficult to reproduce exactly how it is running. All right, so that's the main issue that you have here. So you have other options. Deployment Center. Deployment Center is in the portal. If you go to your app service and then you go to the management, all right, you can set up a deployment center, and then you can deploy code from Azure repos and from GitHub repos, so that every time you, for example, push to master or to main, then it's going to actually deploy to Azure. But you also have other solutions, like for example, deploying for OneDrive, from OneDrive or from Dropbox or even from FTP. All right, so this is also a place to go. I would say it's not quite continuous integration, continuous deployment yet, because you don't have really a lot of control over what's happening, but it is a possibility to do. Another thing, of course, is GitHub Actions. All right, you develop some actions in YAML. You also have a lot of templates, etc., and then they will run automatically when you do certain actions in GitHub. For example, pushing. And of course, Azure DevOps, which allows you to do full pipelines. You can create different releases of your application. You can also have something which is really, really convenient and practical, gated deployment, meaning that you can deploy to a slot, to your staging slot, and then after that you say, I want an email to be sent to a responsible person, and this responsible person can check it out and say, yes, I approve that this goes to production, or no, I want to reject that for some reasons. So Azure DevOps is really very versatile. We have boards, repos, we have artifacts, test plan, we have those pipelines. Pipelines are really cool. It's a way using a UI to define how you want to deploy your application. And you can deploy to really any solution, for example, on-premise, but also any cloud, or even Linux, Mac, and Windows solutions. So that's really cool. You can have your stage environment releases, like I mentioned, deployment approvals, and we even have support for containers and Kubernetes. Now, I'm not going to go deeper into DevOps in this session, because that's really the topic of other learning paths, but it's good to know that this exists. Let's talk about Insights. Insights is about monitoring your application. And in the 5th session, we'll go really deep into Insight. We'll go deep into Azure Monitor. But in here, I already want to mention it so that you understand what it is for. If you have, for example, something where you have a web page and then you have web services, everything can be monitored. It's going to flow into a common pot. And then Insights is going to help you make sense of this data. For example, you can create alerts. If the website goes down, you can create an alert that you get through, push notifications, or that you get through SMS or email, etc. And we'll see a demo about that in the 5th session of this module. Power BI, so that you can create really powerful visualization of your usage, of your users, where are they from, what are they doing, how much time are they spending on which page, etc. And then you can also export that if you have a